think the music, not only the intros, but the music is getting better as well. I was jamming out to that one. All right. Well, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us on this episode of Chill with Jim, where it is always business up top and pajamas on the bottom. I am your host, Jim McCarthy, and I am the client advocate for Strix Louisiana. My job is to make sure that our clients are set up with the best equipment, the best software, and the best IT solutions to help make sure that their businesses are running at optimal efficiency. We also have David DeArmond with us.
Hey, everybody. David DeArmond, owner of Strix LA. I appreciate you being here, and this is going to be a fun episode today.
Yes, it is. So just a little bit about Strix before we kick it off. We believe that there's always a better, simpler, more secure way to do just about everything in this world. So what that means to us is that we are constantly searching and adapting our processes to make sure that we do indeed have the best solutions in place. We believe that part of this responsibility is to help educate our clients as well as others out there in the Facebook world and the internet world as to some of the IT trends that are going on right now in the world. We like to bring awareness to current security risks, and we actually do a few episodes about productivity every month or so. So today we're actually going to be talking about some security practices that will help you, your business, or your home. So I hope everybody has their gummy worms with them today, because we're going to be discussing how network segmentation will stop the bad guys from squirming and wiggling their way through your network. Now, whether
Yeah,
it's a,
we're very fortunate to have I call him Captain Segmentation, Brad Proctor, on the line too. So welcome, Brad.
Welcome, welcome.
Wow. I want a cool nickname. What? All right. Well, so whether it's your home, a large business with 200 employees, or a small mom and pop shop, network segmentation will protect your devices and data. So today what we're going to be looking at is, first of all, what exactly is network segmentation? A little bit about how it works, and then we're going to go into why it's important and the security benefits that you're going to get from implementing some network segmentation practices. So first of all, what is it? Well, network segmentation is when different parts of a computer network or network zones are separated by devices like a firewall, switches, or routers. What it does is it divides a network into multiple segments or subnets, and each of those will act like its own little network. What this does, it allows your network administrators or the person who's in control of your internet to really manage the flow of traffic between each zone. And they can do this on a very granular basis. Organizations that use segmentation to improve monitoring, they also will boost performance, they localize technical issues, and most importantly, they are going to enhance security. So a little definition of it, but I think it's easier to kind of get some visuals here as to how it works and what it does. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And David, if you can just confirm that you see it when I share it.
I do.
All right. All right. So this is an example of a network here. And well, first of all, I'll do the acronym first. So DAAS, that stands for data, applications, assets, or services. So basically anything your home, your business is going to use, that's a digital asset, is covered right there with the DASS. And as you can see, without the segmentation here, once the perimeter is breached, that allows the threat actor or the bad guy in here to move laterally between these two assets. So really all the bad guy has to do is cross this one perimeter line and he's in fairly easily. With this approach, you're really treating the whole entire network as like a single entity. And again, that once they get in here, they're able to really fully move around and do whatever malicious behavior they want. So this is just a little example of some segmentation here. So what you see here is that we still have that outer perimeter covering the devices, but then beyond that outer perimeter, we have set up a perimeter around each asset. So that creates another layer that if the bad guy does breach your main security perimeter here, they are not allowed to easily move laterally because each of those networks has its own little security guards, fence, digital police force monitoring and keeping them out. And so it creates these micro perimeters. And as you can see, what else this allows here is, let's say they breach your main security perimeter. So they get past your firewall. Let's use that as an example. Even if they're able to get to this asset on the left, it's not going to be the threat or the bad guy. They're not going to be able to easily move from that asset over here to the next one, because then they have to breach another perimeter. And I know you guys that have joined us quite a bit, you hear us talking about the multiple layers of security. And this is what we're talking about. And in a pretty good visual example here, we want to create as many barriers, perimeters, boundaries as we can because we want to slow them down. Here's a little bit bigger picture of network segmentation here. So you have your internet coming in, which is typically in most businesses is going to be secured down by a firewall. Then it goes to a router, which basically divvies up all of the network connections. So at the bottom, you'll see each of these has a zone or a segmented little group where it can sit. And so what that does is it means if they get past this top firewall here, they have to then deal with another firewall, another security perimeter or block, really. So that creates multiple steps that they have to do. So for here, they would have to get into the next firewall, and then they would have to do each of these devices. And with the things like the network port switch here, those actually have some advanced security features as well. So in this middle one, they're gonna have not only a second firewall to deal with, but probably some security that's within this network switch. And it's just creating a bunch of layers for them to have to get through. So they can't just hop from device to device. And so I hope that gives a good visual representation here. Also note that they group things kind of by categories here. So you can see with the general, that's going to be pretty much a user-based thing. The PCI network, that's going to be like if you're a point of sale company or anything that's going to be touching financials. And then on the far right, you have your camera or physical security. And it's really good to kind of evaluate and see what groups you should put into place before you just start segmenting away. It's always good to group them together. And so there's a little bit about a little visual for everyone out there. And so why, we'll go into a little bit more about why this isn't so important. And a lot of businesses right now are relying solely on a firewall, which has a great defense to itself, but they don't catch everything. They don't protect about everything. And besides that, the way that the new threats are coming out. Numerous threats are coming out every day. Firewalls do a good job catching a lot of them, but the new ones, they don't always handle that well. So then if you think about it from a home user's point of view, everyday home users is not going to have a firewall in place, most likely. Most home networks, they're going to rely more on built-in security features that come with their routers. And I say that very loosely because they don't really have a whole lot of security built in. Or they can rely on their internet service provider for the security features that come with their internet connection. They are offering some upgrades now for better security. But really, if you think about it, your network is going to deserve better protection and really needs more help bolstering the front lines outside of just a firewall, the routers, or what your internet service provider can protect you against. So an example here would be, let's say a threat actor, the bad guys, they penetrate your firewall via a phishing attempt. And we've seen that phishing attempts are getting more and more sophisticated and harder to detect. So if the systems and services are isolated from one another, that will prevent the breach from growing in size. It'll keep that breach to a very small portion of what's connected to your network. Now, if they are not segmented, if everything is all together, that's where that little breach can become a massive incident that leads to really a full out compromise, because the bad guys are just going to hop from machine to machine to machine. And if you think about it, with all the things that are connected in your office or at home, you think about your smart TV, if it's hacked or if it's compromised, that's probably not a big deal so much. But what's much more serious is if they can use that access point to get into your customer data, or maybe they turn your child's school laptop into a ransomware spreading machine that blasts all of the devices in your home. That's really more of the bigger picture here. I think a lot of the devices that we have on the network now, we think, well, it's probably not going to affect me too much if I don't separate this smart TV, this smart speaker, or whatever it is. But it really is, because once they get in the door, if there's a bunch of unlocked doors for them to move easily through, it's going to really spread very, very quickly. And so if you think about that example before about the TV, if that's all by itself, it's going to isolate that device. So if they do get into it and they try to go to another device on your network, it's kind of like turning a corner in a big maze, a big hedge maze, and you find a dead end. Well, the bad guys are going to have to work their way back and attempt to find another way in, another access point to your systems or to your data. And at this point, most cyber criminals are going to get pretty discouraged, and they're going to look for an easier target. And that easier target is probably not going to be on your network. So they're going to move on to the next target, I guess. So on this note, talking about some of the breaches here, David, I believe there was recently in the news, there was a security camera breach. Did you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it shows a great example of just how, number one, how hackers get into a network and why it's important to do network segmentation. So there was a hack that was announced within the last few days here of Verkada. And Verkada is a major player in providing security cameras, and it's actually managed security cameras. So they help you through the process. You install it. They can keep an eye on the cameras and help you manage your security cameras, which sounds great. Makes it a lot easier for businesses to deploy these cameras. But what a lot of businesses did is they didn't segment their network, meaning they didn't take these cameras and put it on a separate network. And so the hackers, once they got access to the cameras, through a breach at Verkada, they were then able to spread into the other devices that were on the network. Whereas if the business had set up network segmentation, the cameras would all be on one network. So yeah, like you have over there on the right-hand side, all of your cameras are there, and they don't see the registers, your POS system maybe, and they don't see the other computers, the laptops, the firewalls that you or the servers that you may have on another network. When they do a network scan, they get into the camera, they do a network scan, they look, see what's out there. They don't see all of it. And so they end up not targeting it because they're looking for those networks that are not segmented, those networks where everything is on a single network, the same network as the camera. And we've seen this a lot with the security cameras, and you know a lot of people you kind of hear about it, the cheap security cameras that you get from China, and you know, oh, okay, well I know those are vulnerable, and so I'm going to spend more, and I'm going to go to Verkada. I'm going to get top line stuff here. I'm going to get managed and be taken care of, and you think that you're secure. You just stop there. That's not enough. That's not enough, because even somebody like Verkada, somebody like Microsoft, they had a recent huge breach. And now I say breach, a huge vulnerability in Exchange servers. And it's the same concept there. If someone can get access to your Exchange server, and your Exchange server is sitting on the same network as your main file server, well, then they can worm their way. You know, we have all these worms here. They can worm their way from the Exchange server to the file server, and maybe they steal your data, or maybe they encrypt it all and perform a ransomware attack. Whereas if you have your Exchange server properly segmented, then okay, they get into your Exchange server, you have a big problem on your hands, but it's not as big as it could be. So those are some real world examples of what we see out there. We're seeing the same thing with IoT devices. You know, that's the Internet of Things. That's all those smart bulbs that you know, you can change the color, or it can detect, because it's connected to your phone. It can detect when you're getting home, and it turns the lights on for you. Those things are great. They're really cool. Home automation is really cool, not necessarily secure. So when you start bringing your work device to your home, and someone has infiltrated your smart home devices, and now they see your work computer, and they infect your work computer, and then because, hey, you are security conscious, so you have a VPN, but it doesn't necessarily protect you within your home network. Well, they get into your computer. Now they have direct access to your work environment. So we see with this work from home environment that we're in now, you're opening up the doors to some major threats. Network segmentation, I like how you said it at the beginning. It's a layer. It's another layer, and that's a lot of cybersecurity is just about putting layers in place to protect you. Network segmentation is a layer. It doesn't cost extra money. You don't have to buy. So if you don't mind putting up that graphic again of the network.
I took a lot of time putting this, photoshopping this together. Let me get that up. Here you
go. That network diagram does not necessarily have to be physical devices that you put in place. You can create these concepts virtually. So you have the router / firewall, and then the firewall and the router. You can do that all within one device, and you can even do that to an extent with the home devices, the home wireless networks. It does take a little bit of expertise, I guess you could say, to get in there and create your separate networks. But it's possible to do all of this without spending extra money. And so you add some layers to your cybersecurity protection there. with no more money. So that's part of why it's very attractive. Yeah, so there you go.
All right. Yeah, and that's some great points there. So a few things I thought of just since you're talking about the at-home networks, and a lot of us going and doing work from the house, a lot of our children doing their schoolwork from the house with a school provided laptop that you don't know how secure it is and you don't know what they put in place there. As if you think about all of the devices. So for example, my house and just my house, smart TV, smart grill, that's right. A grill that connects to a fancy grill that connects to our Wi-Fi, Sonos speakers, Arlo security cameras, and then my roommate's computer and my personal computer, my work computer. So what I've done here as part of Strix, we want to keep it safe, is anything that's work related to me, there's an entirely separate network that never even sees any of that other stuff, because all it takes is one of those devices to get compromised and it's going to move throughout. And a lot of us, I'm sure we're thinking, oh, I work from the house, from the house with my work laptop once a week. So it's not that likely. All it takes is that one time you connect, and a good point on that too is if you have finally segmented your network to have a wireless that's totally separate for your work devices, make sure to go ahead and forget the old network that you had that was connected to everything, because your device isn't going to know. It's going to pick up the strongest signal. It's going to bounce back and forth possibly. So you might not even know that you're connected back to the house. But that's a very important thing to do, to forget those old networks that you don't want to connect to. And then talking about, that security Verkada breach that happened with their security cameras. Think about this. Tesla's warehouses as a whole were infiltrated. So it's a pretty big company. You'd think they'd have a whole bunch of security in place, and they probably do.
Yeah.
But this one just fell through the cracks.
It goes back. It goes back to the idea of supply chain attacks that we talked about before. So, Tesla, I'm sure they have an obscene amount of cybersecurity going on, but they have these Verkada cameras, and Verkada got hacked, and really Verkada had some questionable cybersecurity practices going on. What made it so bad is that they had a super admin user, and that user had access to every single camera that Verkada managed. And I saw another report about individual users, their personal accounts, employees of Verkada, they had access to all of these cameras through their personal account. And so what that means is if one of those people gets breached with phishing, with whatever, then now the attacker is able to worm their way into all of these systems, including somebody like Tesla, including Cloudflare. Cloudflare is another one that was involved in this breach. And now, do those companies have proper segmentation? And that's the lesson to learn here. What we hope, and I'm sure what Elon Musk hopes, is that they have good network segmentation. And so those cameras, the cameras were breached. Okay, they understand that that is a bit out of their control. The cameras are breached. How far can the attacker get? Now that the attacker has access to the operating system of the camera, are they able to see other devices like servers, like other firewalls, like whatever it may be? Can they expand their reach into other things? And there are some hackers that are the ones that are perhaps responsible for all of this, that are posting evidence that they were able to get into some other areas, and we see some rather rather significant companies that are in the security space maybe didn't have these practices. And that's what makes all of this so nerve-wracking, because you're talking about major companies that that put a ton of money into this, and all it takes is one little crack. So
Yeah. Yep. And so think about the implications of that. David, Brad, what are, as a business owner, what are some of those qualifiers? What are some of those questions that I should ask my supply chain to make sure that they're doing good practices?
I think the biggest thing to realize, especially with IoT devices, which is really where a lot of this comes from, is you have no control over that device. So any device you place on your network that you have no control over, you should assume it's compromised. Period. End of story. And if that's the case, then that should be placed, that should be segmented, and because we don't trust it, but in a place where we assume that it's going to cause a problem, whether it's going to or not.
yeah,
and that could be anything from, something as simple as a garage door opener or a gate opener, something so simple, but it's a little device, no screen, no keyboard, but has an internet connection. Someone were to compromise it, if it's on your main network, they have a direct into your data.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to look at it. So you're not even asking questions to your provider. You're not, you're not going up the supply chain and saying, asking your managed camera provider, hey, what do you guys do for password security to make sure that your passwords aren't, just assume that their passwords are compromised, that their systems are compromised, and that their cameras are compromised, and build your network accordingly. Be sure to keep all of those things separated, segmented from everything else, so that when the hacker actually utilizes the connection they have to that device, you limit how much damage they can do.
Yeah, and Verkada's going to have to answer to, I'm assuming, some privacy violation questions that'll come up at some point. As far as the data, that's something that we can control as far as using their product. But if they're hosting it and the video is all controlled by them, that privacy and keeping that is kind of on them, not necessarily on the end user. So that we'll see what comes of that in a couple of months away.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that there's going to be a lot of talk about what does this mean for privacy from that standpoint.
Yeah, that's I bet their owners and the people responsible, they're not sleeping well right now. They have a lot to worry about and a lot.
It is not to beat them up. I mean, they actually have a very impressive product.
Yeah,
and it's just some bad decisions that you have to assume. Like we said, everyone may be that way, and if they are, we got to protect ourselves and assume that.
Yeah, the SolarWinds attack, same thing. It's a couple of bad decisions, and that's the advantage of being an attacker versus a defender in the cyberspace, because the defender has to be right every single time. The attacker only has to be right once, and it is so easy to make a mistake, or it is so easy to just overlook something, or it's extremely easy to not even realize that there's a potential vulnerability out there. The Microsoft thing with Exchange, that wasn't known about for a long time. Then it comes out, and Microsoft reacted quickly. They put a patch out there, but did you realize that Microsoft put a patch out there? And patching an Exchange server, that takes a maintenance window typically, because you're bringing your entire email down, and Microsoft helped through the process. But you know, it's not even known, and once it's known, it gets abused very, very quickly. So yeah, you've got to have the extra layers to make sure that you just limit the damage, like the ships that go out on the ocean. They're segmented. The hulls of those ships are segmented, so that if there is a breach, if there's a hole created in the ship, that only one compartment is flooded and the entire ship doesn't sink. It's the same thing that we're looking at with networks. If there's a breach, when there is a breach, make sure that only that one is flooded, the entire ship doesn't sink.
That's a great example. Yeah, so I guess then it comes into that those security questions might be better asked for the services that you're using, because a service you can't necessarily segment, right? So SolarWinds, how does one that relies upon their services segment that? That's a lot tougher than a physical device.
Yeah, and you may not segment. I guess that's a little bit different than segmentation, but what you're looking at there is zero trust, and what Brad was talking about, that you just assume that everything is compromised. We use a service called ThreatLocker, and I know Brad loves him some ThreatLocker too. It is a zero trust environment, and it's something you can do with a service, so that if the SolarWinds service or program that you have installed starts making calls to places that it's not basically pre-approved that it call, ThreatLocker stops it, and it just says, no, you're not allowed to do that. And so in that way, you're creating little segments. It's not a network segment, but it's a process segment, I guess you could call it.
Yeah, and you can do that from network segmentation as well. A little different, obviously, with SolarWinds, because it has to have really, broad access to everything.
Yeah, that's the point. That's
right.
The point of SolarWinds.
Correct.
Yeah.
But you can have instances where, let's say you have your main file server, and then you have another segment that is your backup server. Well, that backup server, for no reason, should be able to access the internet. There's no reason that it should have any egress. So why allow it? Block that. Obviously, if it's a client on the network, they have to have internet connection. But your backup server in most cases doesn't, unless you're doing cloud, but then you only allow those certain data streams that are allowed. So it depends on what you're dealing with on the network as to how much security you put on that segment. Again, SolarWinds being completely different.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. That example, a tough example.
Yeah, I think but that's also why they were targeted. Because you get access to SolarWinds, and all of a sudden you got the keys to the kingdom. But it's the idea of zero trust and the philosophy of least privilege, and that's where Bricata kind of made some mistakes. Is least privilege, and that's the idea of everyone should have the least amount of privileges that they absolutely need in order to accomplish whatever, and I say everyone, everything within your network, every user, every device. And so Brad's talking about a backup server. It needs the least amount of privileges that can be applied to it, so that it can accomplish its function of a backup server, which means it doesn't need to do much else. And because it has least privilege, maybe it's the thing that gets compromised. Then it doesn't have access to get into other areas, or if other areas are compromised, at least the hacker doesn't get to your backup server. And so you kill the other server that is compromised, and you bring up the backup server, and you can get back up and running pretty quickly.
Yeah, so as you can see, there's the segmentation concept can be applied really throughout what you're using as a person, in your home, as a business, especially in businesses. But we also have to think of the implications of what we use at the house, because that could go back to our businesses, but also we want to protect our families. And that's one where we're not going to have a Brad on staff at the house to make sure everything's on its own. It's going to take a little bit of research, or it's going to take reaching out to, another company or expert to help you understand exactly how to do that. And then I like the zero trust idea. It also should apply to privacy, because this idea of privacy, it's a great idea, but there really is very few things, if any, that are truly private, that you can rely 100% that your whatever it is being privately looked at. Only these eyes can look at it. And a great example that I have that was like one that I had in the past, where people were doing the swabs of your mouth to get your DNA and to look at where your ancestry is and all that. And, back when it was really, really first coming out and popular, people were saying, oh, you should go do it. You should go do it. And I just didn't trust that whatever information they get is going to stay there. And everybody kind of looked at me funny until a few years later, when one of those major companies, the mouth swabber companies, was bought by another company that was they were like a a genetic research company. So there goes all that privacy. The company, let's say it was swabyourmouth.com. I trusted them with all the privacy. Well, now this other company comes and buys them. And now whatever information, whatever assets they had is in the hands of the new company. So I think it's really good to look at a broad spectrum of things, because you can take the word for it. For the cloud, for example. Oh, well, I know Amazon is hosting my cloud. They say they back it up, so it's super safe. That's where you bring in a third party to make sure that if something happens, there's someone else to help look after, to help care for, to help make sure all of that is still there.
Yeah, and I would say, you're talking about the home networks and protecting what you have at the house. A lot of routers these days, the default setting is very often where no device can talk to the other device, but there's almost always a setting that you can change so that no device can talk to another device. And I would say, probably use that. Because if you're an unsophisticated user, you're not doing a whole lot other than using your phone and connecting your smart TV, that sort of thing. Use the setting where no device can talk to any other device on the network.
And Brad,
yeah, I didn't even realize that was a newer thing. I knew that a lot of home routers were introducing guest networks, which is kind of does the same thing. And I was going to say, I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see router manufacturers for home users to offer, like during the setup process, to, hey, let's create a network for IoT devices.
Yeah.
And explaining what that is. And I think that would be it's not like a standard, but I feel like it would be really good for the industry to kind of to go forward with, because people are only, they're going to, human nature is to do the simplest things possible, especially at home. And so they're going to connect it. It works. They connect. They get on the internet. That's all they care about. And so if there's just during that setup process, there's something to make it easy for them. I feel like it would be such a needed area for some of these manufacturers to focus on. And it's not hard.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think the argument to that would be when something takes 3 more steps to set up, the person who buys it is going to go for the easiest one. So I've noticed just setting up the router modem new device that we put on our network. The first step, number 1, is the easiest way to set that up. Press a button makes all the devices easily connect to it, because they want to sell their product, and their product, they want it to be as easy as possible to use. And so I think that manufacturers are going to have to get over that hump a little bit, or us, our human nature has to change just to where we're okay doing a little bit extra to make sure that we're secure. I love the idea, but that's the one thing I see manufacturers being like, well, we want to make it as easy. They just got to plug it in and it's good to go, because
Yeah.
that's
The way you kind of get around that is you ask the question, do you have any of these devices? So they don't know why you're asking the question. And then you tell them that they have to connect these devices to this network. So you don't tell them why. You don't give them an option. You just say, hey, do you have it? Okay, well then connect them to this.
I love it.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the device, if the router does a basic network scan and grabs all of the devices, it can look at the machine address code, the MAC address, and determine what device it is. There are databases out there, and my guess is it wouldn't be extremely difficult for the router during the setup process to look and say, okay, these devices that we found on your network look like IoT devices. Confirm that and just, you know, put it on the other network. These devices look like laptops, and so that can go on this network. These, you know, and it'd be pretty fancy, but it seems very feasible that it could create rules in the background to allow only certain types of communication. So, okay, I know that this device is a printer. I put it on a network. We need to be able to print to the device. So let's allow just this one particular type of traffic to go to pass in between. If it's any other traffic, we block it, and build some of those default functions into it. I think that would be really cool. Brad, get on that, man.
Yeah. Linksys, I know you're listening, so that's our idea. We want royalties.
So I was going to say, I'm not a pen tester per se, and this is where, you know, someone like Harley would come in. But if you chain together a couple of recent events, so you take Verkada, for instance, that they were able to get root access to these cameras that were on a network, and let's say they are segmented, but let's say that this company decided that they were also going to say, hey, well, these cameras have to get out to the internet. They obviously do. Well, they need to be able to get to DNS. Well, if you string together a recent patch from yesterday, the same day that Verkada talked about this, there was a remote code exploit for Microsoft DNS servers. So you kind of chain those together, and you have gone from a Verkada camera that was thought they had it segmented over to a Windows server that probably in most cases is also running Active Directory, and they can remotely install software because of this vulnerability.
Yeah.
So you got to think outside the box of just, hey, we have this segmented, but what else can it reach at all?
Yeah. 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 Thanks, Brad. Now we're all depressed.
I'm sorry. I just put that together as we were talking.
So yeah, Brad says, you know, I'm not a pen tester, but if I was, here's what I would do. It sounds like, Brad, maybe you just need to go ahead and do the pen testing thing, because yeah, you're talking about, and that's exactly what hackers do, is they group together vulnerabilities. And you know, that's the big, I was thinking we ought to do a chill with Jim on hacker movies, and just go through and grab several scenes about how, you know, the hacker sits down and, oh, I've got to get into the Pentagon, I'm in. Yeah, it's definitely not that easy, and it is chaining together a bunch of attacks, and it is lying dormant, and that's where you know, the hackers, they get a foothold, and if it's a high value target, they're going to get that foothold, and they're going to sit and they're going to wait, and then they're going to hear about this this DNS exploit, and they're going to say, oh, I've got a foothold and I can utilize that DNS exploit, and they're going to push it down and expand. And these guys are patient. If it's a high value target, they'll sit for months, for years, just waiting to find on their own or to hear about an exploit that's going to get them to the next step. And you know what Brad's talking about there. Well, you know, how far do you go with segmentation? Because you could set up a separate DNS server and it's not connected to your Active Directory, and you know or you could just point it to the Google DNS or the public DNS or something like that. But how segmented do you get, and at what point does it become almost unreasonable, especially for a home user or a small business user, to create those segments?
Great points. So now that we know that there's a lot of scary stuff out there, we can actually just go over a few more of the benefits that you're going to see with your segmentation. It's not all has to do with security and stopping the bad guys, but it will better. And remember, we're all about better, simpler, more secure here. So it's going to better your defense. It's going to better your visibility. This will give you basically a better look at how your network traffic is passing through all of your systems. Like we talked about, it's going to limit lateral movement. It improves your network performance. So just separating these and being able to, like, if you know everybody at work uses this network to do their Facebook stuff, you can't stop it. You want to stop it, but you know if you stop it, they're going to quit. So you allow them to do Facebook, but now you crank down the bandwidth a little bit. So they can use all of that, but they only get maybe this much of your network, when your core systems are going to get this much of your network. So that's where another benefit of doing this is you can really start to control kind of where all of your resources are being used. The outer perimeter is great, that we talked about earlier, for just detecting an external threat. When you segment the network, it's much easier to find internal threats within, because it's not like you're looking at this group of 100. Now you're looking at maybe 5 over here and 10 over here. So if you start to notice erratic behavior within that group, you'll get a little suspicious.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Jim, because once you've narrowed down your segments and you have like devices on a segment, you know better what to expect, what kind of traffic to expect. And so if you have an IoT device, and really all of your IoT devices, they're on the same segment, or at least a group of them, and you know what cloud server that they're going to talk to. You know that they're only supposed to be talking to these 5 IP addresses out there, these 5 other servers. When you see it start trying to talk to something else, now we know that this segment of our network should never be talking to these other devices. You can lock it down with a firewall, but if you're seeing that, you know, okay, something in here is compromised, and that's a very good indicator for you. So that I like that point.
Yeah, and so just a little more simple terms, if you are grouping these devices by the only language they know how to speak. So all of these only speak Spanish, and all of these only speak French. And now you got the Spanish group trying to speak French to the French group. You're gonna be like, whoa, you're not even supposed to know French. What are you doing? And so that when we talk about talking and IP addresses, ports, calling to the cloud, that's a little bit, I guess, simpler to understand. You know, this group only talks to the cloud server in English. Well, why is it trying to talk to it in a different language? So that's kind of what you can help you create a little picture in your head there. It does, for those of you that are out there in the industry of compliance, it does make it much more easier to to regulate and control your compliance. When those pen tests or penetration testing goes on, and you're able to say, well, you guys did get through, but you only got through to these 3 devices that are on the lowest totem pole of what information we touch. That's a great thing to be able to prove, because again, if there's a vulnerability out there, sometimes there's not much you can do about it. But if you smartly segment these, they can only get to that really, really small stuff that's not going to do a lot of damage.
Yeah, if you're in a regulated industry, and we see this, but it's probably required that you have network segmentation. And we've certainly seen situations where the network didn't live up to really what they were supposed to be doing. You know, if you're in the medical field, the data is supposed to be segmented. Patient data is supposed to be segmented to an extent that not everybody can get to it. And so are you thinking about that? Are you putting that in place? Those are some important things, because if you get a HIPAA audit, you want to pass that. You don't want to get fined for it.
Yep. Yeah. So you know, I think a good start would be to kind of look at all of the things that touch the internet and put them into categories. Put them into categories of likeness, but also put them into categories of what's your most important stuff that you want to keep protected, and you know, lock that one down the most, and then kind of filter out the other ones as you see, like we talked about with the performance. And if you know that these devices, you only want to give them a little bit of the speed and the power of your network, that's great, because that's really all they require. It gives all the other devices that need a lot more resources free reign, kind of, to use them.
Yeah, I think if you're looking at at most business networks, I would say great place to start your smart devices. So there's a lot of smart TVs out there that are being used as monitors. I would say look at your smart devices, create a segment. Keep your phones off of your primary network. All of those phones, generally people are using the phones to access Facebook or whatever, something outside of your network. I'd say keep the phones separate, create a separate network so that they're not touching internal aspects. You know, you can go so far, and it gets a little bit more complicated of separating your printers. And if you have an IT provider that is good with it, you can set your printers up so that they only communicate with the print server, and your laptops and other devices that need to print only communicate with the server. And so they have to go through that bridge. And because that's an easier thing to monitor, you don't have 100 devices all going straight to the printer. Everything goes through this one specific tunnel. And if it doesn't fit, then you block it. So those are some quick areas. The easiest to, I'd say, phones and any smart device.
Yeah. And businesses out there, if you do have an IT provider, someone helping you out with your security, with your technology, please tell them, if you do add a smart TV, or if you go ahead and add a smart light switch, or the air conditioning now, air conditioning and heating is all smart technology where it connects to the internet. So it's important to keep that communication up, so you do know, so that they know, so that you know what's out there, what's on your network. A lot of times people don't know all of the areas that are talking to the internet. So just think of it, if it's smart, if it's communicating somewhere with other data, let your security company, your IT company know, so they can properly put that on its own little network. And this is a great thing for, you know, think about a multi-tenant or like a landlord-based company, property owner. You know, at Strix right now, we're able to take that same incoming signal from the internet, from the big internet, and we're able to divide it off into companies. And those companies within this building can then divide that off by devices. So again, segmentation. And if you're a property or business owner, to use that segmentation is just another way for you to sell yourself, because it's super secure. You know that if you have two businesses, they're not accidentally sharing the same internet. They're not stealing each other's speed. So if you know you have a company over here and they watch movies all day, it's not going to affect you as bad because it's your own network. So some great things to think about here. I don't know if we have any questions out there in Facebook world, but this has been a fantastic discussion. If you have any questions, as always, reach out to us. You can do it Facebook. You can do it through our email, support@strixla.com, or just give us a call. I don't know the other ways. Can you YouTube? You could write it in YouTube, I think, too. Yeah, write a comment in YouTube.
You could put a comment in YouTube.
So we're happy to share. And as always, this will be on our YouTube. So you can go back. First, you have to like and you have to follow us, and then you can rewatch it. You don't necessarily have to do it in that order, but please do all of those. And you can go back, see what we talked about. If there's something that you don't want to, if you want to kind of skip over, that's what's cool about doing it on the YouTube. So be sure to join us, follow us, like us. And David, what do we have on the books for next week?
Well, we're going to hear a lot more from Brad Proctor next week. We're going to be talking about wireless networks. All right. Brad's going to demystify them for us. You know, we hook these things up. Automatically, everything just starts talking. There's no wires on this thing. How is it talking to everything else segmented on my network? Brad's gonna break it down for us a little bit and help us understand what's going on.
Awesome. So that he will be our special guest next week. You did hear from him today, and if you know, as you can tell, there's a lot of knowledge, a lot of wisdom we can gain, a lot of experience as well. So join us next week. It's going to be the same chill time at the same chill network. We appreciate all of you for coming out, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.